Which 6th level spell is the best 6th level spell? This week, I give my ranking of the top 10 6th level spells in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Hello players and GMs, I am Reese and welcome to another video by Jetpack7. If you want to hear about my videos before everyone else and get the coveted first comment, be sure to hit the notification bell and subscribe to my channel. It would help me out a lot and you'd get to rub it in the faces of everyone who comments after you. This week, I am ranking what are, in my opinion, the best 6th level spells in 5e. People may not like me for this comment, but I honestly believe 6th level is one of the weakest level of spells in 5e. To me, this feels like one of those levels where most of the spells are only a little bit better than the levels before it, but with a few standouts that I believe should find their way into your spellbook if given the opportunity. And those are the few spells we are going to be talking about today. Just a reminder that these spells are by no means weak. I just think 5th to 6th is not as big of a step up as, say, 4th to 5th or 3rd to 4th and so on, with some exceptions. And the first exception I'd like to talk about is Disintegrate. It should be pretty obvious why Disintegrate found its way onto this list, and it's this number right here, 10d6 plus 40. That is an average of 75 damage. No other spell in the game up to this point averages anywhere near that sort of single target damage, not to mention it turns them to dust if they hit 0 HP. With the added bonus of being able to get rid of a wall of force and whatever other objects of force exist in this game, this spell packs a pretty heavy punch. The only reason it is so far down the list is because if they pass the save, nothing happens. But that's not an uncommon theme with non-damage spells in 5e, so I don't count it against it too much, just enough to not put it any further up this list than 10th. And trust me when I say it's got some serious competition. Either way, if you can lock them down, give them disadvantage on a dex save, or even restrain them, this spell is gonna hurt a lot more than pretty much anything else in the game. And speaking of hurting more than pretty much everything else in the game, let's talk about our 9th place spell, Odaluk's Freezing Sphere, or as I like to call it, Cold Fireball with 3 times the radius and 2d6 more damage. That's basically it. It's a fireball that deals cold damage, it has a radius 3 times the size of fireball, and deals 10d6 damage. That's all great, but it has a couple added bonuses of fun little interactions. Instead of blowing it up right away, you can turn it into a small bead that blows up in a minute, or can be launched from a sling or thrown by hand by someone else. Obviously, those are niche situations in which that will come in handy. The most common thing I can think of is giving your allies time to clear out of the damage radius, but that by itself is a pretty nice bonus. I have an image in my head of slipping the bead into someone's pocket and watching them from a distance as they turn the city square into an ice sculpture, but maybe that's just my inner DM planning a villain for my next campaign. Who knows? Either way, this spell packs a huge AoE punch, more than any spell up to this point, and definitely deserves a top 10 placement. In 8th place is a spell that requires a little bit of foresight, but can be an absolute lifesaver, Hero's Feast. The biggest bonus to the spell, in my opinion, is the immunity to fear, but depending on the situation, immunity to poison and advantage on wisdom saves can be equally helpful if not more. The addition to max HP is small and could potentially make a difference, but the other benefits are definitely why you take this spell. Anybody who has fought a dragon knows why immunity to fear is huge. Nothing is more frustrating or more debilitating than having to constantly run from the dragon because you're frightened from its aura, or not being able to move closer to it and having disadvantage on attacks against it. It drives me crazy. So being able to just ignore that entirely with a single spell that can affect your entire party is obviously incredibly game-changing. Not to mention, poison is one of the most common damage types in the game, so having immunity to that will likely save your party some serious strife if the enemies have anything that deals poison damage. Basically, do Hero's Feast before you're fighting a green dragon, and enjoy your stroll through its poison breath and fear aura. Also enjoy watching your DM get very, very bored as you quickly do away with what was supposed to be an extremely difficult fight. In 7th place, I have a spell that I don't think I've actually ever used, but after taking a look at it, it simply had to be in the top 10, Word of Recall. This spell is another very simple one. You designate a spot related to your deity as a sanctuary, and then whenever you need to, from anywhere in the world, you can just teleport yourself and 5 allies back to that spot as an action. The biggest weakness of the spell is that your allies have to be within 5 feet of you to be teleported, so it isn't a spur of the moment life-saving spell by any means, but it likely would only take a round or two at most to get into position for the spell to take your whole party home. Now, obviously this spell loses a lot of oomph when you have a 7-person party, but that's pretty big for an average game of D&D, so that likely won't be an issue. Either way, an instant teleport far, far away from wherever you currently are is a massively potent ability, and the fact that it takes you back to a familiar location without the chaotic nature of a spell like Teleport, which is a 7th level spell, is seriously amazing. There isn't a better escape spell in the game than this one, which I think makes a very solid case for one of the best spells at 6th level by far. In 6th place, I have a spell that I have underrated for quite a while, but I think I'm giving it its due diligence in this video: Sunbeam. This spell is incredible for a couple different reasons. First of all, you can do 68 radiant damage every single turn in a 60-foot long line. If the creatures move, which they should, you can just use an action to create a new line of energy without recasting the spell and using another spell slot, so already, that's amazing. 68 radiant damage a turn to multiple creatures is an awesome ability to have. Now add to it the fact that all of those creatures are also blinded if they fail to save, and you have a freaking powerhouse of a spell. So now not only are you roasting every creature in a 60-foot line with radiant energy, you're also potentially blinding them, making it very difficult for them to hit your allies and easier for your allies to hit them. Not to mention, there's a possibility that you don't have to move the beam at all and you can use your action for something else while the beam continues to roast the creatures. Unlikely, but hey, it's possible. Maybe your DM forgets to move them. So yeah, the damage may not be as big as the other spells at this level, but the utility it provides more than makes up for that in my opinion. I am once again placing a mobility spell in my top 5. This time, it is Scatter. I just love this spell so dang much. I've said it a million times and I'll say it again, positioning in combat is huge. Movement speed is only good because it allows you to position more easily, and Scatter is simply one of, if not the best mobility spells in 5e. It allows you to reposition up to 5 creatures wherever you want, and the best part is, they don't have to be your allies. Obviously, moving your allies is great, but do you need a creature to get dropped into position for a big AoE spell? This is the spell to do it with. Moving your allies is a guaranteed repositioning, which is amazing. Moving enemies could potentially fail, but obviously there's a bit more you can do with that if it does work. This spell provides more mobility for your party and potentially repositioning of the enemies, which makes it an extremely potent spell in my book and one I will always find a place for if possible. In 4th place, I have the sort of summoning spell that can either be extremely powerful or very underwhelming depending on the kindness of your DM, Planar Ally. This spell doesn't give specifics on the power of the creature that is called forth, so it leaves it up to your DM, or up to the narrative of your party, to determine what kind of creature is brought down. It could be a super low level celestial or a ridiculously high level one, and the strength of the spell obviously depends on what your DM decides. It can also get pretty expensive very quickly, so there is a bit of a downside, but if you're casting the spell, it's probably a pretty dire situation for which no amount of money is going to be too much. Either way, there are some extremely powerful creatures out there that can be summoned, and having one as a temporary ally in a difficult situation could absolutely save you from a party wipe in a way that not many spells in the game can. Extra bodies are always powerful, but the strength of that body makes a huge difference too, and this spell can potentially provide a stronger body than any other summoning spell in the game. Unless your DM is cruel and unforgiving, in which case, probably don't use this spell. In 3rd place, I have a spell that sounds ridiculous, but is sincerely one of the most incredible spells in 5th edition, Otto's Irresistible Dance. Why is this spell so insane? Its initial effect just happens. No saving throw involved. You pick a target, and they have to use all their movement speed, they have disadvantage on dex saves and attacks, and all attacks against them have advantage. Guaranteed. Unless the creature is immune to charm, then this spell will definitely lock them in place. Not to mention, the only way to break free from this is to use an action to make a wisdom save. So the target of this spell is guaranteed to at least waste one action just to try to make this save. And let's go ahead and make this even crazier. Even if the creature has legendary resistances, there is no opportunity to use it until their turn comes around. You can use this spell on an ancient dragon. You could use it on a friggin' kraken. As long as it isn't immune to charmed conditions, this spell will make them tap dance away their action and allow you and your allies to pepper it with damage for a full 2 rounds of combat before it can do anything else. So few spells in the game operate like this, and that makes this one extremely rare and extremely powerful. Take this spell, especially you bard players out there. What could be more powerful than Irresistible Dance? How about a spell that instantly heals the target for 70 HP, cures blindness, deafness, and all diseases? That's right, I'm talking about Heal. Irresistible Dance may take an enemy out of a fight for a round or two, but Heal puts an ally back into a fight in a very substantial way. There is simply not a healing spell that can turn a fight around quite like Heal until, well, a bit later into the game. Don't want to spoil my later lists. Nothing brings me greater joy than seeing my barbarian player's face when I tell them I am casting Heal on them, other than when I'm DMing and I see their face when I tell them I'm counterspelling it. 70 HP is a lot. It's that simple, and giving that to someone who is going to essentially double its effectiveness is obviously very massive. But giving it to anyone at all allows them to fully re-enter the fight without getting knocked down again and again like usual. Those extra turns alive can be totally game-changing, along with the fact that it's got some pieces of a greater restoration tacked onto it, which simply makes this one of the best healing spells in the game, without a doubt. It has to be up here, in my opinion, very close to the top. And in first place is a spell that can just end an encounter entirely, even at later stages of the game, Mass Suggestion. Potentially influencing 12 targets to do whatever you want for the next 24 hours is just really crazy. You can walk into a room full of enemies and tell 12 of them to go deep into the woods and find Tom Bombadil, and if they failed their save, they'd have to try. Let's say on average, half of them pass. That is still 6 enemies you have completely eliminated from combat in the single casting of a spell. Unless you're fighting some very weak enemies, there isn't a damage spell up until this point that can do that kind of thing in all likelihood, so this is just an absolutely encounter-changing spell. There is nothing better than removing several enemies from combat in an instant, and there are very few spells in 5e that can do it quite as well as Mass Suggestion, which I think makes it a very strong contender for one of the best spells in 5e, and definitely the strongest at 6th level. Now, I'm aware this is another one where I contradicted my previous spell ranking video because I put Disintegrate as my honorable mention and Heal as my best spell, but this just goes to show that my opinions are constantly developing and changing with D&D, and with a bit more research and thought, things can change pretty quickly, as you can see. Alright, that's all for this ranking video. Let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree with where I put them. Did I misplace anything, or did I leave any spells out that definitely belong in the top 10? If you liked this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to my channel, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you around.